All right, so we got a good would you rather question today, thanks to Emmett over here. So as you know, we always got to fail in life. So in this, there's no upside. So as Emmett said, you either get to be driving an executive to the airport. They have to get on the flight, super important. Otherwise, they don't close the deal and it costs your firm, let's say, roughly, $1 million. Big firm though, so general context, right? And you're driving there and you run out of gas and they don't make it. And it's 100% your fault. Other option, you are going to check out somewhere really embarrassing. I'll let you put context there because everyone's embarrassment level is different. Okay. And use the corporate card on the transaction. You forget you did it and you submit your expense report with it on there. So then now they think you're trying to have the company cover it. And so that executive pulls you into a room, has a conversation about awkward said purchase, and you have to talk your way out of it. Which failure are you choosing?
B, hands down. Yes. I wouldn't want to cost my company a sale. I feel terrible. I feel like the future of my position would be more at jeopardy with option A. It just bothered me more viscerally hearing that.
So what if you didn't cost them money? They just missed their flight home to see their wife that they had a surprise dinner with.
Similar. They probably have more of a say in my future at the company, and success is very important to me as opposed to a random expense person. And I feel like I could BS my way out of that one.
Have you ever accidentally used your corporate card on personal stuff?
Yes. That has happened. Coffee, basically, because I'm addicted, and so I'm pulling. And I use my corporate card to pay for professional meetings and coffees all the time. So it's an honest mistake. Yeah, I know that's like PG version. What about you?
It's super PG.
I'm sorry.
I've done it. The worst I personally spent on was I went to the grocery store, went grocery shopping. Completely only card I had on me was my corporate card, and I was like, well, we're gonna use it because the card's already full. I'm already through the checkout line. Didn't get in trouble for it, but it's interesting Emmett brought it up. So I'm thinking back when I managed a fleet of drivers back at my old job when I was at a different company. And one of the guys, I started scrubbing all of their, I don't know if you know what a Wix card is. So they use it to like pay for gas. So it's basically a credit card, but you can only use it at a gas station for like diesel, DEF fuel, different types of things like that. And started going through this guy's expenses because no one had ever scrubbed these drivers' expenses. And they've been here like 10 years. I'm like, that's interesting.
Oh, yeah.
So I started going through it, and we find out every time he gassed up, which for some reason he had to gas up every day, he was buying a, what do you call the like 40-ounce beers? Those
like the 40.
A handle. No, that's a
malt.
1.5.
It's like the
but you know
I never lived in Wisconsin, so I don't know.
Okay. So you know those big 40-ounce though, like malt beers you can get in a gas station in other states.
Yes.
So he was buying one of those and a pack of cigarettes every day on the corporate card. Yeah. And when we confronted him on it, he said, I don't know. He goes, I'd always told him to do 2 different transactions, so I don't know why I'd be on that card. And we're like, well, did you ever give him a different card other than the Wix card? He's like, well, no. I was like, or Wax card. And he's like, well, no. I'm like, well, how would it get on your personal credit card? And then he's like, oh, no, I did do that. I'm like, okay, well, clearly you did.
Yeah.
But even worse, he was driving with it in his truck. So I don't know if he was drinking and driving, but
sounds like
terrifying.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So in that scenario, I think you'd rather just run out of gas.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe. So again, you all have tuned in to Do You Even Fail? We like to just talk about how we all mess up in life daily. I like it. I was reading Marcus Aurelius quote the other day, and he's talking about how more people every night need to sit down and reflect on that day and how they could have been better. And it's not about beating yourself up. It's just really about self-reflection and forcing yourself to do it. I don't think many people do. Excited to have you on because I feel like you're one of those who self-reflect more and actually internalize not, oh, hey, I just failed by this, but there's a deeper lesson I can get inside of that. So I'm excited to hear what you're going to talk about today. But let's just give everyone a little bit of context. I've known you less than a year.
That's true. Yes.
But we've had a lot of great happy hours and deep conversations.
We have. I agree.
So it'll be another one today is the goal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Stay tuned.
But ball in your court. I know you kind of have an interesting background from where you were to where you are.
Yes.
But I'll let you fill everyone in kind of who Karise is, both inside and outside of work.
So professionally only or
no, personally
origin
too.
story?
Yeah,
okay.
Let's hear it all.
I grew up kind of all over America. I went to 6 different elementary schools in multiple states. My father was not in the Army. He was, I think, escaping himself without realizing that he took himself with him wherever he went, and he kept recreating problems, and then we moved to escape. We landed in Lakeville when I was in junior high, and then I graduated from Lakeville High School before they split into 2. So I guess I'm that old. I went to Boston for a year, mostly to escape my home life. I thought I'd stay in the East Coast forever. I missed my mom. I came back, got a psych degree from the U of M, got married in that process, part of my failures. And then I went to law school. So after law school, I practiced law for a couple of years, and then I moved to Thomson Reuters, where I had a sales career for 7.5 years. By the time I left, I was managing national software sales team, which was a huge surprise to me. I never thought in a million years that sales at a Fortune 500 company would be where I was, let alone something I'd be good at. And then a recruiter from my current firm reached out, and I made the pivot to the financial services industry, and I'm currently a wealth advisor. So that brings us. That's 3 different industries, and I'm 37, so yay.
So young and moving, which is good.
Yeah.
That's the one thing they say about Minnesota, though, is it's really known for looking at your skills, not at your industry you're in. And it seems like you would agree with that.
Yeah, I suppose so. Is that a Minnesota specific
Yeah,
thing,
so
really?
yeah, when I was part of the Minnesota Chamber, they had this big event going on, and one of the reasons they were able to keep younger people here, even with the cold, was the Fortune 100 companies that existed inside of Minnesota. It was a very weird ecosystem where they didn't care if you were at Best Buy and an executive, and then you went to like Cargill.
Yeah.
Even though it's 2 totally different worlds, they looked at more of the skill set that made you successful there, not your knowledge of that industry, which I thought was interesting. Then they had a whole bunch of stats to prove it. But yeah, Minnesota.
That makes that makes sense. Yeah.
Interesting. So I have to poke. You already said what your first failure was. So
yeah.
Are we gonna unpack that a little bit, or what? So you got
Are we
married
gonna go
young.
straight in the yes, I went straight from a dysfunctional upbringing to a dysfunctional relationship. I mean, if we're going to go straight into the failure, which I'm totally fine to do. Like,
we're jumping in.
The worst year of my life, where I feel like I failed in every aspect of it, was from the fall of 2012 to the fall of 2013. Like, just categorically. So I graduated law school and then passed the bar and was sworn in the fall of 2012. And I did all the things you were supposed to do. Right? I was on law review. I was near the top of my class. I did the summer internships. But at that time, being post-2008, the legal community hadn't really recovered from it. So they weren't hiring associates the way they do now or the way they had done before. So I didn't have a job offer. Like, that wasn't supposed to happen. My career is exceptionally important to me. This had been a lifelong dream. So that was soul-crushing in isolation. And then throughout the next year, you layer in like terrible interpersonal things that were happening, total breakdown in my marriage, which I think somehow, having a baby in the middle of that was like a great freaking idea. And I got pregnant and then I miscarried. And there was a series of so many horrible things that had happened that I was left with nothing other than, how do I even make sense of my world going forward? Because everything I thought was supposed to work out and I thought was supposed to be true has failed. Utterly, across the board failure. And it was the first time I experienced like an extreme loss of self-confidence. Because even though my upbringing was very toxic, I had a weird internal confidence in this sort of like hubris, I might even call it, of like, if I feel it in my gut, then it's right. I'm always right. And I have a tattoo on my wrist that says, "Maybe you're wrong." Okay. And I got it during that year as a reminder that I should check myself before I wreck myself, because I had wrecked myself in like an epic way. Failure and pain are an amazing teacher if you let them, right? You can become bitter or better. And I use that and a whole lot of therapy to reflect on what had happened and why it had happened. And I've come away with a ton of answers. But that was to date the lowest point in my life.
And so
I
you
hope to
would
never
own
top
it and put the onus on yourself though for that year. That it's kind of like your own creation. You caused that through your own decisions for most of that to occur.
You are your own lowest common denominator at the end of the day, no matter what. And you can place blame all around. And I could go, well, my abusive father led me into all of these things. But at some point, I don't know when it is. Maybe it's not 18. Maybe it's 21. It doesn't matter what happened to you. It's your life. And you have to take responsibility for it. So, yes, these were all the summations of my decisions. So how was I going to make sure that didn't happen again? And it's not that I didn't fail after that. Like, believe me, I have. It's a learning process. But that was the first big wake-up call that something was fucked up and I needed to address it.
Okay. So ton to unpack here.
Yeah.
I'm geeking out. I'm pretty excited about this right now. So to start off with, I was going to dig into like biggest lessons learned from that time, but I think you hit on something really important where the biggest crutch in society is the crutches we use to excuse our behaviors.
Yes.
And blaming it on everyone else around us. We all have darkness that's happened to us. We've all gone through valleys. And instead of measuring, be like, well, mine's worse, it's, well, we don't know the individual's own personalities and strengths. We don't know how that valley affected them. Just because a certain valley is easy for me doesn't mean it's easy for someone else. So... And I think society, though, would say, hey, not fair to poke in that. Like, we all need to cope, and it's part of just our existence, and it's okay to lean on that because it makes us, more personal, relatable. But I think we've overcorrected. So in your life, one, do you agree with that? It sounds like you do. And then two, what would your response be to people who are like, hey, Karise, like, it's okay that all those failures happen. They're actually not your fault. It is because of your childhood versus you owning it and going, no, at some point I have to choose to move on.
I mean, I think it's somewhere in the middle. Like, you have to learn to forgive yourself. And that has honestly been the hardest thing for me. It's easier for me to forgive other people than for me to forgive myself. And you can rationalize all of that. Like, okay, well, what caused me to get to this point? And then I can forgive it because what was it? Maya Angelou's quote, like, when you know better, do better, something along those lines, right? And I didn't know any better, which is why I made these mistakes and I failed. And then I learned and I did better. So that's when the accountability comes in. But if you notice this pattern of I keep doing the same stuff and ending up with the same results and I'm unhappy with it, then I think that's your sign that it's time to take your own personal responsibility. And you don't just get to forgive everything that happened because of what led you to that point.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about, as you watch consistent, repeatable patterns, right, happen to you, what I've noticed are with a lot of people I know, they end up going to counseling, right, which I'm in counseling. I'm a fan of it.
I love therapy.
But what I find interesting, I think there's two mindsets. I actually talked to my counselor about this. I was like, hey, I'm worried I'm not coming in with the right mindset. Because I said there's the mindset of, hey, I'm here to fix me. And there's a mindset of, hey, I'm here to fix everyone around me. Like, everyone else is the problem.
Yes.
And I was asking about that, and she goes, it's so hard as a counselor because we see that happen. And no matter what we do, they've already made up their mind. They're just here to pick and choose our words to validate their next move.
Yes.
And then you see so much catastrophe happen when people choose that route versus I'm going to therapy or counseling to fix me.
Right.
Because I know I have a lot of issues.
Yep.
So as an individual sitting at home right now, how do you walk through that of going, hey, stop blaming everyone around you and start looking internally and going, what am I doing that's causing this repeated behavior?
I think it goes back to what's motivating those behaviors and understanding them. Like, for example, what caused everything bad to happen in my life that led up to the mostly 2013 was these ingrained beliefs and behaviors that came from my childhood that I'd never really sorted through. Was damage that happened to me mentally, emotionally, or otherwise growing up that I never wanted to address. I was like, oh, that was fucked up, but it's fine. Like, I'm fine. Like, I'm better than that. I'm better than my dad. But I never went back and addressed it and figured out, well, why do I feel this way about other people? Why am I attracted to men who on the surface don't look anything like my dad, but when it comes to how I feel emotionally when I'm with them or live in a home with them, it's nearly identical. Like, where does any of that come from? You have to start asking the hard questions and be willing to look at that stuff and relive it. So when people are like, oh, I just want to focus on the present, focus on the future and let the past go. I'm like, but that led you to exactly where you are. So if you don't examine it, you have no opportunity to choose something different and rewire your brain. Like, you know about neural networks, right?
Yes.
Right. Well, those get formed in childhood and then solidified by our behaviors going on. So if we don't look at how they got formed and choose to respond differently or act differently, you can't reprogram your brain. It's just not possible.
It's so you're going down a really unique path, because when I went back to counseling my second time, I said, hey, here's the 5 things like I really want to work on. Like, I'm tired of doing these 5 things. And she looks at me and she goes, oh, so you want to break apart your superpowers? And I was like, I think you're confused. Like, these are bad behaviors. And she goes, most bad behaviors that people have were superpowers as children to survive their childhood. Oh. And then they overcorrected, and it became now a weakness that was tearing them apart from the inside out. And I was like, okay. I was like, when I looked at it, I was like, oh, yeah, when I was a child, like, I'm a huge people pleaser.
Yeah.
But I was a child, the only way things would be good half the time was if I was going around making sure everyone in the household and everyone was happy, right? Everyone's okay. I was the peacemaker.
Yep.
Well, now I was doing it to my own detriment, where now all of a sudden I would be, Emmett, yeah, I'll do that for you, and Ryan will do that for you, and Thomas will do that for you. Next thing I knew, I'm letting them all down because I can't do all of it.
Keep up with it.
And they're like, what are you doing? And they're getting mad at me. And so it's your superhero now becomes your superpower becomes your weakness.
Yes.
So you hinted at there's things in your past you had to like face.
Yep.
What would be the 1 to 2 biggest ones you had to face that you're comfortable bringing up?
Sure. I mean, dealing with the theme of dissociation, I suppose, and I'll explain more.
Perfect.
So I definitely dissociated quite a bit in my childhood. My father was very abusive in many different ways. And so to cope with that, and everybody reacts differently, I shut down and just lived in my head. So I wasn't socially I was not popular growing up, and I don't think I really knew the proper ways to interact. My parents didn't fully display that for me. I got moved around a lot. I didn't really develop those skills, but I think mostly I just wanted everyone away from me so I could focus on my goal, which was escaping. And so that dissociation, I think, caused a lot of difficulties in my relationships with other people because I was independent to an extreme. I read some meme somewhere that super independence is a trauma response. And that I still have trouble with people doing things for me, but it is much more balanced now than when I was 20. I'm like, no, I'm going to do everything for myself. I need to be able to do everything for myself. And that imbalance that you're talking about, with your situation, that helped me survive my childhood, but it prepared me for a complete and total lack of success as an adult because I didn't know how to be in relationships in a healthy way.
So which area of your life did that implode the most in 2012 to 13?
Personal, only because I didn't really have a career to speak
right.
of.
No,
I had been in school.
Personal's great. No, yeah.
Yeah, so that's where it really blew up. But a lot of that did actually have to do with this failure to launch this career that I had been working towards since I was 15. My dream was to become a lawyer. My mom was a legal assistant, so I'd grown up around law firms, and I was like, oh, that's my ticket out of here. And my intellect and natural ability to excel at school was the only place I found reward. So I figured if I just keep getting, the degrees, keep getting the good grades, keep getting the accolades, that this will somehow translate into the career success I desperately wanted internally. And so that was a huge part of my emotional fallout from that period of time, is that I didn't get that and I didn't understand why. That's not the formula. It wasn't supposed to work. So partly it was career crappy, but mostly it was my interpersonal relationships, which sucked. I mean, across the board.
Dive more into that. What is that? Break that apart.
I because I didn't know how to form healthy relationships, I didn't even know the word boundary. I mean, I think it's something people are talking about more these days, and that's a good thing. But that wasn't defined for me. I didn't know how to operate in them. And what had been displayed for me growing up was if someone asserts that they don't want you to act a certain way or they don't want you to do something, it doesn't matter. Do what you want anyway. So I would bowl over people's boundaries. I let them bowl over mine. I accepted things I never should have. And that caused me I created unhealthy relationships and attachments with everyone around me, unwittingly.
So would you say that naturally drew in the exact same type of people because they're the only ones who could tolerate that
Correct.
behavior?
People who have boundary issues are the only ones who want to hang out with people who have boundary issues. And strangely enough, all of that contributed to my lack of career success. Because yes, I can blame it on the market was shitty. It was shitty. It was harder to get hired. But had I been able to relate to in a healthy way socially to my peers, and I had not been in such a messed up dynamic with my husband, which was taking a lot of my attention away, I would have formed quality relationships, done the necessary networking, and probably would have had an amazing job offer when I graduated. But I didn't know any of that.
So it's interesting. Formula comes up a lot, and almost what you're saying is, hey, you can follow any formula you want, but ultimately everything comes down to that interpersonal connection. And where you failed was going, hey, I didn't spend the time in law school to develop relationships with the teachers and with even you did the internships, but they weren't like, oh, hey, I love Karise as her personality. They were, oh, hey, I love her work. But outside of that, does she fit our mold?
Right.
If she doesn't, we don't care how good she performs. We're not going to bring her on board is the issue, right?
Oh, yeah. You want to work with people you like and trust. And I don't think the way I acted socially at that time was all that likable. And that was further reinforced by my husband at the time was very socially, did not like people. People didn't like him. He was abrasive. I mean, he's kind of a dick. And you become like who you're around. And so I had relationships with people like that. That was normalized behavior for me. And I didn't realize how all of that was contributing to the exact outcome I didn't want.
So what did you say to yourself during those times about everyone around you? Because normally you're saying like, hey, they're the problem because blah. So what was that when you were in that lifestyle? What was wrong with everyone around you in your head?
They were not as smart as I was, right? Like they're imbeciles. They're just not my kind of person. I don't like people. That's what I would say. It's like I only like this tiny handful of people. I was a misanthrope, which is someone who doesn't like other people, and that's how I just excused it all. Like I'll just show up and do the work that I need to, but like everyone else can fuck off.
So inside of that, were you like really lonely?
Yes, but I didn't know it. I didn't. I had covered up with so many things. Like I was always working nearly full time, in school full time, dealing with emotional stuff from mostly my marriage and things that came from out of that, family issues. Like my parents got divorced when I was 18, which thank God they did. But that caused this rift because I cut off communication with my father, which was a very healthy decision. But both sides of my family were like, he's your dad. You can't stop talking to him, which caused a deterioration in all of my family relationships. So I didn't realize it, maybe just because of like the momentum of what was going on. It didn't even occur to me that I was that lonely until 2013. But 100% I was.
So would you equate that behavior to just like your dad's, that he moved around because he was running from himself, but he didn't realize he was bringing himself with him?
Yeah. It is a humbling fact for all of us that the original relationships we have in our family of origin, our parents, whoever raised us, our siblings, they program us and they tell you this is how you're supposed to be in a relationship. This is how husbands and wives treat each other, brothers and sisters treat each other. This is how we treat the world. Even if you go to public schools like I did and you watch other people do whatever, the mold you have is the family you grew up in. And that's what I grew up in. So I became that.
Right.
And we all do. So if you have like a healthy environment, most people have better outcomes as adults because of that.
So will you ever talk to your dad again?
He died.
Okay, sorry.
Well, I think it was best around. So I didn't talk to him for 14 years. And that was a deliberate decision. Had to stand against both sides of my family to do it. But I felt very convicted because he was incapable of having a healthy relationship with anyone or anything. Super addictive personality, had like hidden alcoholism. Like I learned about it later. He was abusive in many, many ways to everyone he met. And that wasn't going to stop because that was his programming. And he was, I think when like after a certain age, that just becomes who you are.
Right.
So we didn't talk for 14 years. And then I heard through the grapevine, like my aunt, that he was in hospice. You're only in hospice if you're dying.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a short
and I knew
window,
he had heart problems, and there had been like I think your dad's going to die. And I was like energetically like, no, he's not. But for some reason, the summer he died, like a couple months leading up to it, my heart had kind of changed towards him of like, I think this is legitimately the end. And I think I should take the opportunity to make peace to some extent. So I did see him one time, 3 days before he passed away. That was a lot.
Are you still at peace with the decision you made?
Yes. Honestly, seeing him in hospice, like barely recognizable to me, because I hadn't seen him in 14 years. And when someone's in hospice, they're deteriorated. So he looked barely recognizable. It validated that I was right to not talk to him for 14 years, because even on his deathbed, where he did ask for forgiveness to some extent, he hadn't seen me in 14 years. I had a child, right? So he had a grandchild he'd never met. And he spent 3 hours talking about himself and didn't ask me one question.
So let's unpack that a little bit more.
Okay.
How it couldn't have been easy the whole 14 years, right? I mean, like when you had a kid, there had to be like a small part of you that was like, hey, I wish my dad could have been a good person to meet my kid, or was it just peace?
Like objectively, but mostly I felt fine. It started with extreme anger that kept me away, like hatred. And then I had worked through enough of those feelings in therapy that I had gotten to a point where I forgave him. And I think they use that term too loosely. Like, oh, sure, I forgive you. I'm like, yeah, but if you're harboring bitterness, you haven't. And that's okay. But like, let's be honest about it.
Let's be honest and actually go at the bitterness and figure out how to get over it.
Yes. So I forgave him. And I did that, honestly, by accepting on a deep level that what I wanted him to be and what I deserved from a parent, he was incapable of giving me probably by the time he was 12. His upbringing was even more abusive than mine. Not an excuse. Like, he became an adult and he chose to recreate the pattern, right? But how could you expect someone who was never capable of giving you that to give you that? So everyone has to have their own path to letting it go. That was mine, and I cried a lot about it. And 2013, with the failure of all of my relationships, brought all that shit to the surface. I'm like, why did I just find out my husband cheated on me with my best friend, and I'm crying about my dad, like sobbing about my dad, because it's the fucking root of it.
So what was the root there? Unpack that for the audience, because a lot of people aren't going to connect that dot.
Sure. So the root of how my father demonstrated that husbands treat wives, men treat women, and how he treated me as his daughter set me up to marry someone who was exactly like that, who acted towards me the way that my father acted towards me and towards my mother. Like, ironically, that's what finally ended their terrible marriage when I was 18, was that my dad cheated on my mom with her best friend. So, again, like recreating the cycles. It doesn't always look like that on paper. Like, my ex on paper was nothing like my dad. Absolutely nothing. But emotionally, remarkably similar.
So since 2012 to 2013, I would call kind of your realization era, right? Like everything started to click.
Yeah.
Since then, what are you doing to not repeat the cycle? What have you adjusted?
That's a great question. Like, absolutely everything. I have had to, because of the utter failure across the board in 2013, I could no longer not look at every aspect of my life. And that took a long time to sort through. So it came in like bits and pieces. And meeting my current husband, who's been on a similar journey, who is like a patently good human being, was a catalyst for a lot of that. But it's been self-reflection. It's been, why do I choose this? Like, what caused me to do that? And if I don't like that outcome, how can I change it? And learning different ways of being. And that's very uncomfortable and it's very unnatural until you build neural networks around it. So a lot of times it's choosing to act differently, even if it goes against all of your instincts.
So through that, if someone's listening, because right now, I mean, I would say Emmett knows a lot of my stories. A lot of what you're saying creepily resonates in my life. And I would say my biggest battle with trying to break all the generational stuff in my life and a lot of decisions I've had to make, I would say most people don't agree with because it involves, I don't talk to any of my family, so I don't see them anymore at all. And to me, the hard part was I had to go sit back and go, okay, what am I doing today that is rooted in my past?
Yeah.
But I would say my biggest battle was, is this the right move or am I in the wrong? And I always am questioning that as I'm going through these things, which counseling is super important, having the right type of people around you is. But how did you face that regular occurrence, at least for a while? I know it slowly dissipates.
Yeah. I don't know. Self-doubt is really hard, and it was exceptionally hard for me because my whole life, the only person I could count on was me.
Yeah.
I was the one who got me out. I'm the one who saved me. And so if I'm fallible, that means I can count on no one. And like that contributed to like a complete breakdown for me in 2013, just that realization that like I can trust nothing anymore. So how do you pick up those pieces? It's finding people you can trust who have learned lessons and have something in their life that you want to emulate, and then having them as a check and balance. A good therapist or a coach or like whoever that is, like, you know, call it your own personal board of directors, something like that. But accumulating those people has been key, because when I'm experiencing that self-doubt, I can go, hey, gut check. Is this messed up? Is this like, what do you think? And you have that safe space with them to get that feedback. So I have an amazing therapist. I have that with my husband and certain other like close friends and my mom, who we've done a lot of work to repair our relationship. But yeah.
So with that, I mean, if you didn't change your behaviors, obviously we know the basics that would have happened, but from a long-term joy standpoint, even though you removed everything and had to rebuild yourself, which is super painful, most people, the minute they start it, it hurts enough, they quit it. What's the motivation you give people to keep pushing through that pain of rebuilding yourself and taking the time to reflect? So I would say when I first started it, the amount of realization of how like messed up you are and like how imperfect you are and how much you have to fix, you're like, well, I'm just, I'm about as useful as a, pile of manure. This is great.
Yep.
You're like, why? This is insane. What would you give feedback to someone on? Because anyone's going to feel that way when they first truly look internally and go, wow, this is a dumpster fire.
Yep. And I think this is why most people don't want to, and why a lot of people can't get over that hurdle. But for me, it comes down to the power of choice. There is pain on both paths. But you can choose a pain that's going to lead to better outcomes, or you can surrender to a pain that's going to lead to shit and more shit. There's pain on both paths. I watched this documentary called, this was totally forgetting the name of it. This guy, he interviews his psychologist. Like, he's a humorous actor. Why am I blanking on his name?
Can you see if you can find that, Emmett? Thanks.
Stutz is what it's called. And it's... Can you tell me the name of that guy? I'm like blanking on it. He's Judd Apatow. He's in all of these. Jonah Hill. Thank you. Oh my God. So it's an interview with his therapist, and it's actually exceptionally well done. Like, it was really great. I encourage you to watch it. But his therapist said something that still sticks with me to this day, that there are 3 like life rules that are inescapable. There's uncertainty, pain, and constant work. And you can find a way to embrace that and like fall in love with that process and see the merit of it, or you can spend your life fighting against it in futility. So I think that's how you change it. It is pain on both paths. So why not choose the one that gets you better outcomes?
So why do you think most people don't? Because I would say it's not the amount of self-reflection you have. First, I hope you understand. Like, kudos to you. It's not the norm.
Well, same. You do.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. I mean, you know. I mean, and you, Emmett. If you ever sat down with him and I, we will sometime outside of the podcast space. He is as deep down the rabbit hole as I am, and him and I connected because of a lot of stuff you've gone through, I've gone through, he's gone through, and we really dive in deep and go, how do we are clay. Like, so many people, you think you're not clay and can't be reformed. You can.
Are.
You just need the right inputs and outputs.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so why do people, why don't they, do you think?
Fear. I mean, one, I think, starts with a lack of knowledge. I didn't know this shit at all. Like, I was completely and totally blind to it until I got hurt really badly, and that woke me up. So I think you need to have one of those experiences to even have an opportunity to make a different choice. And then when that happens, I don't know. Like, I don't know what's different about me that I made a different choice that some people can't make.
Do you think some people just don't have the ability?
Possibly. I mean, I hate to just pigeonhole people like that, but it's possible they don't actually have the capacity. Like, enough damage has been done. Like, my father, for example, I'm not excusing him. I still believe that, like, there must have been a point where he could have made a different choice, but he was so damaged, I'm not even sure that his brain formed properly enough to be able to be that kind of self-reflective. But I think for your average person, if you've got a wake-up call and you've got even like one good person around you, or you read a good book or anything to like hang on to, there's a shot. Yeah. I think the more we're having conversations like this and normalizing talking about this, the easier that makes it.
Yeah, I would say it's talking about it. So many people, I think fear's a huge piece. And I think a great example is Em and I have gotten to know each other more. He's seen this side of me that I'm still dealing with all the stuff that happened from my past. That sometimes I'll just spike and get angry. Just like out of nowhere, he's like, dude, you just snapped at me. And so we're at the gym the other night lifting, and I just came middle left. I'm like, hey, dude, typical guy things is just, we're still getting used to it. I was like, hey, sorry about that moment. Like, I know I snapped my B. And he goes, hey, do you mind me asking why, though? Like, I know you reflect a lot. Why? And so I unpacked the whole thing. I said, well, when I grew up, our whole philosophy was at the dinner table, no one's opinion was right. You always had to defend yourself. You always had to go to war about it. So there's moments where I feel I'm having a long day and someone comes at me and I know I'm right. I just will just fledge and go, all right, let's go. Like, we're doing this. And there's a lot more to unpack behind that I shared with him. But those conversations, it's crazy because one, it gives him now grace towards me. But my initial fear was, well, now he's not going to like me because I pop off and get angry.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, now that you explain it, no, I get it. And now I can help you with it. When it happens, I can see it happening. He goes, I can pull back in the moment and give you grace. But then afterwards, we can talk to each other and go, hey, dude, remember when you popped? Like, what are you doing to work through that? Yes. And I just think the fear part, if we pick the right people around us.
Yes.
The fear goes away when you call it out and you give a name to it and you give an identity to what's happening, and then you go change that. And don't make it your identity. That circumstance is one. It's not your identity.
Yeah, fully. And I think you touched on another good part that you put a word in my head, accountability. And maybe that is the personal board of directors that I'm talking about. But when you have other people who have the same value system and outlook and want to learn and be better themselves, they can hold that standard for you when you drop it. And then you just continue to be better. I mean, after 2013 and like the following years, I lost pretty much every relationship I formed from the time I met my ex-husband to the time I left him. They all disappeared. But they were all based on an unhealthy premise. And the healthier I got, the less we had in common and more they disliked how I was interacting with them now. And you try to explain it like this is where I'm coming from, and maybe someone's capable of following you there, but if they don't want it, you don't really have another choice. Like, it's holding you back. And I've realized at this point in my life that the order of operations is health first in every way before family. It has to be, because otherwise your family relationships can be unhealthy.
Yeah. If you're not healthy, how can you create a healthy relationship with your kids, with your spouse, with your friends? It's not possible.
Nope.
But I think something super important you touched on is when you go down this road, it becomes very lonely at first. And also a big thing I struggled with was, when do I let friendships go?
Yeah.
And what people I think need to realize is, if you're truly growing, you don't need to figure out when to let it go. It'll just go. They will remove themselves from your existence.
Yes.
So like, I don't like this new Devin. They'll probably jab at you at first and say, you've changed, you've done this, you've done that. That's where hopefully you have the coach or a counselor or a friend to go, yeah, you have. Good job. Like, don't change it. But I think so many people, another thing on top of fear would be the comfort of the ecosystem they live in. Like, yeah, but I'm going to lose all this. Yep, you are. And you have to go build it all again. I know.
Yes.
But it's
I think
also
some
happier.
people are not willing to let that go. I've had these conversations with people in my extended family who are very kind-hearted people, but they struggle with seriously unhealthy boundaries, and other family members who take advantage of those, their lack of boundaries. And they're like, the cost of that relationship isn't worth my health. I would rather keep this unhealthy relationship than do what I need to do. It is that fear of loss. And to me, having walked through that matrix and been on the other side of it, I'm like, but you're just perpetuating a cycle. And like all these other, like the children that are around you are watching this, and then they're going to do it. So how can you not have that context?
Right.
Well, when you're looking at it. But again, I didn't when I was 25. But it's like I do now. And I don't know, the most you can do is connect with people who are like-minded and are encouraging you to go that way. And honestly, I can tell you, like after doing the hard work, you start finding success in all of the ways that you previously had failure. Not that I'm perfect, not that I don't fail in moments and have teachable, of course you do, but all of the stuff I had been wanting my whole life, a peaceful family life, a happy marriage, like being healthy physically, a successful career. All of that came out of fixing the fucked up shit inside me. All of it. Like when we talk about, failures in terms of business on this podcast, right? 'Cause the business failure podcast.
That's going away. So we're actually getting rid of the business. We're going to paint over this orange. So audience, you get to know now because by then it'll happen. And it's just the failure podcast because so many people aren't. The conversation we're having is 10 times more impactful to this than just talking about business.
Well, that's the point I was going to make. If you will actually get farther in your business if you fix this stuff. Like, yes, there are wildly successful people who have super messed up emotions and dynamics, but that success doesn't bring them any kind of happiness. And usually the organizations that they found and run, it trickles down.
Oh, yeah. And then becomes toxic. And
right. And that's where all of that comes from.
Well, I'd even argue that, most of those people have achieved success in spite of those problems, not because of them.
Yes. That's a great point.
I would argue if they fixed it, they'd probably even be, 5, 10x as successful.
I agree.
But yeah, I think anecdotally what I've noticed is people have, to your point of, if people are sort of beyond redemption in certain situations, I think no one truly is beyond hope, but I think it's the echo chambers we create for ourselves.
Yeah.
And they become so familiar that, there's that fear of letting go. But I also think there's a fear of once you acknowledge with, for example, addiction, the first step is acknowledging you have a problem.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people have a fear of being accepted or accepting themselves if they acknowledge that. And it's easier, even if it's blatantly obvious to everybody else, it's easier to die on the hill of, hey, no, this isn't a real, issue I have, rather than, hey, maybe there's something I need to look at here, because that, once you start pulling on that, it's hard to stop.
Right. And it could potentially unravel absolutely everything, all of your relationships. And it sounds like you've had that similar experience, and that's your choice.
Right.
I lose all of that, or I have a healthy life. I guess you gotta pick your pony. I picked healthy life.
Right. I think what's crazy, the one piece of fear I had, and I was talking to a friend of mine about this, and he started going to counseling. He's like, hey, I had the same fear. The biggest reason, and it brought it up because you're talking about businesses, and in spite of that, they become successful. My biggest fear of unpacking my baggage is like, hey, I already know what my weaknesses are now. I just need to control them, right? Like just grab the steering wheel. Because I was like, if I fix them, then I lose my edge. I was like, I lose what makes me great. I lose what has gotten me all my success to this point. And it's such a counterintuitive thought. You're like, why would you lose it? You just become greater. But I just want to call it out because I think a lot of people who are super successful, like, right, but if I'm not quick and snappy and this and that, I don't have this fire, then it's over. My success is gone. It's like, well, no, it's not how it works, but.
Yes,
yeah.
I struggle with that too. There's that fear of letting go. I agree, because it's what's worked for you for so long that
nothing else could.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Or like, I'm not me then if I'm not hustling constantly. Like I struggle with that. Like yeah.
So with that, when you were working through all these things, was there any a thing on the podcast we like talk about was fallacies, right? Was there anything you tried because it was the loudest voice in the room and it supposedly would fix problems and it just was a complete myth throughout that growth process?
There were a lot of messages I got about just like, well, forgive everybody and like come from a place of love and just embrace the positivity and focus on what you're grateful for. And I will say, yes, that's true. But I think in society, we've taken that to an extreme where you're not like, you shouldn't be focusing on what you're upset about, or this shouldn't be bothering you that much because there's so many things you have to be grateful for. I don't think that's real. I don't think that's human. Like there are days and there are moments and sometimes there's an entire fucking year where you're like, I'm not grateful for shit. Like this happened and it was horrible. And yes, I'm like, I need to learn from it and make it better. But I guess you might call it toxic positivity. I tried espousing that for a while after 2013. Like, oh, well, if I just listen to what all these people say about, how you're supposed to be as a person. And like, I think women have even like a stronger pressure on that to just be like grateful all the time. Blessed. I think it's shit. I think everything in balance, right? And that's an imbalanced way to look at it because there are a lot of dark brushstrokes in the painting of life. There are a lot of things to not be grateful for.
Yeah, it's interesting. I used to say I wasn't an emotional person, but I've also learned like the best sales reps are really emotional people. So, hey, I'm going to own it. And that was always one of my biggest pet peeves was people never express their emotion. And then people get confused by me. I'd be like mad in the moment. They're like, well, Devin, you can't go do da, 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 da. And I'd be like, well, what do you think I'm just going to go slap Billy over the head and then, go drive through someone's. No, I'm just letting out some of my feelings. And I got trapped into that. Well, then I just won't let any of it out. And I went to my counselor. I was like, how do I not get mad? She's like, that's cute. It's not an option. You will get mad. You should get mad. It's what do you do with that? Does it control you?
Yep.
Or I'm aware of it. I'm mad right now. I'm going to let it be.
Yeah.
But I'm going to control my tongue in the moment at least. Or I'm going to, but she's like, don't even try and control your mind. Like, just notice, hey, mind, we are feeling angry right now. Like, this is here. That's okay. But let's not email, call, text anyone or anything. Just sit and go, why am I angry? Let's process it. What should we do about it? Versus hide it. And I would be curious on your opinion. I think we also should normalize being in a room with tight friends and allowing the lid to go off and vent about it. Be like, you wouldn't believe what happened to me today. Such crap. Like, I'm so mad about it. And say some kind of just irrational, dumb things.
It's called catharsis. Yes.
You're right. And people are like, well, no, because then you just get angrier when you do that. I'm like, no, I mean, it depends who's in the room. Are they fueling it or are they listening to it?
Right. It also depends on how actively you're engaging in that. Again, it's about the balance. But yeah, we're all emotional beings. And I think people are like, the thing you need to be concerned about is being emotionally out of control, not being emotional.
Right.
You should be emotional. We're humans. Like, I had a therapist early on after I was maybe like 2014 when I would say, I don't want to be as angry and bitter. I don't want to feel depressed. I don't want to be lonely. I don't want to be confused. And she's like, so you have the goals of a dead person. Cool. That's never going to happen. So what do you do to balance all of that and embrace the full spectrum of human emotion? Yeah, and just not live in each one of them. Like they're fleeting. They come and go throughout the day. Right.
Yeah. I always tell people, I'm emotional. My life's a lot more fun. It is.
It is.
It's just so much more
We get to have
enjoyable.
conversations like this.
Yeah, right.
And actually connect to other humans, which I think is what we all want and need.
Yeah, I mean, Emma and I are like yearning for it so much. I just want, like, how much you're opening up today is an absolute thing of beauty where so many people will be ashamed of it. And I'm not going to lie, even to me today, there's a couple of things I was like, I'm not going to bring it up. I was like, I'm ashamed of it. Like, there's what if said person is watching? And it's like, well, no, you're not. Us opening up about it, we're not hating on anyone around us. We're just talking about what happened to us in life and how we've taken control over it rather than letting it take control over us. Yeah. And that's what people need to understand is this is super helpful in growth because we're not going to go, hey, this happened to me. That's why I did this. No, this happened. So I need to do this so I don't do that behavior or that circumstance response.
And what's the phrase, like breaking the third wall? Like, this is a personal theme in my life. Vulnerability is strength. It is not weakness. It is strength.
Yeah, you're secure in who you are then. You're like,
yeah.
Hey, I am this. Yeah, I do have that issue. Yep, you're right.
Totally fallible. I had it's not an ideal childhood. I spent a lot of my 20s in dark places and like that all sucks, but I'm not the only one. Like we all have shit. So why are we not talking about it?
Right. Yeah, I mean, everyone's got an ugly past to some level, some more than others, but we've all gone through stuff. Yeah.
Do you find that when you open up with that, like you lead that, you get a lot more vulnerability because people feel safe?
Yeah, it's the only way, as him and I were talking about, like the more, and that's why we're excited to have you on today, is like help people see this is what we're going for. This is what I will bring to the table, and I will open up and share this whole gamut of life that I'm going through that is very ugly. Yeah. But we had a podcast that'll be coming on already is out technically by this episode, we'll say. But we're shooting it early. So we brought my wife in and his girlfriend, and we sat down for 2 hours. We're like, hey, we want to hear your stories of failure and what you've gone through. And there was moments of sadness and anger and frustration in it. And we're like, this is what we're creating. This is the ecosystem of do you even fail of, yeah, we do every day, and it's really ugly, but it's so relieving to talk about it and get feedback and grow together.
Yes.
And so that's what we're trying to do with this, far more than solve how to be, the next great business person. Like, no, how do you be the next great person? Because then you'll be a great wife or dad or boyfriend.
Yeah, whatever it is you want to do.
Whatever it is.
Yes, I agree completely.
So what's the challenge you're going to leave with people? I mean, you've unpacked a lot. I could go for like 2 more hours, so you will be coming back on. I hope you know that. You're going to be a repeat guest.
Reoccurring segment.
All right.
And especially on the Saturday, or on we do it Friday or Saturday nights, but pick one. Love to have you bring someone with you. You're definitely going to have to plug in on one of those. And we just
if you want the most amazing conversation, you bring my husband on.
Perfect.
His story is even more dramatic than mine.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So it's the after hours edition.
Yeah, it's the late. I like it.
Can we have real bourbon?
Yeah, we will. We'll postpone it for May.
I don't need it clearly, but we really love bourbon.
Socially. So. Well, yeah, we have a whole extensive history on it for both of us. But what is a very practical challenge? I mean, someone's sitting at home right now. You've talked about actually internal reflection, therapy. Taking the onus on yourself and stop blaming people around you. I mean, what's the nugget you leave with them to walk away with?
I think the most important thing is if you don't like the outcomes you're getting, explore why you're making those choices. Because I promise you don't actually know you're not that conscious of them. We're not born being that way at all. It takes a lot of work and practice to just go, okay, I'm feeling this. Why is that happening? I did that. Where did that come from? And I promise you'll find a pattern. Oh, that's exactly what my mom did in this situation. So that's how I acted because that was normalized for me. Where did that come from? You could probably trace it up a generational tree. But once you figure out the why of all of it, it's easier to change.
Yeah, and I would say to actually put the effort into changes I would add is once you've identified it, and don't do it on your own. Go get some help at some point.
Yeah, if you can.
If you can.
Yeah.
If you can't, I don't know, hit us up. We'll get you in on a Friday night chat, and we'll try and unpack life together. But, it's take that time, sit in silence, drive. I was just commenting on someone's post the other day. We don't sit in our own thoughts enough anymore.
Yeah.
And then my favorite thing to do is whenever I drive, put nothing on. Just get in my brain and go, what's going on up here?
Yeah.
What did we do the last day? What should we done different? But I appreciate you having you on. You haven't tried this delicious drink yet. I'm super frustrated. I'm actually not frustrated at all.
I thought we were supposed to like specifically taste it together. I didn't realize I was supposed to be
He's been drinking it
I've
the
just
entire episode.
been drinking it the whole time.
So this is a Craftwell cocktail anytime, no proof cocktail, pineapple margarita, which is probably just pineapple and lime juice.
So I can't wait. Yeah, okay. So you have to tell me what you think it tastes like. I already have I think the best description of what it tastes like.
It is not terrible tasting. It tastes like watered down pineapple and lime juice mixed together.
Do you know what it reminds me of when you were a little kid and you would be in the cafeteria and maybe your parents brought it home. My parents won those little containers of pineapple that was like canned, but in the plastic tin, you peel it open and you drink the juice out of it. That's
exactly what this is. So it tastes pretty good, but I feel about non-alcoholic cocktails the way I feel about like vegan meat. Like it's like, what's the point? I mean, I'd rather just not have the 100 calories that are in this and have water.
Yeah, see, that's my frustration is I'm like, I feel like a kid drinking a juice pack.
Yes, that's like, I'm not knocking it, and there are a lot of valid reasons to do that, and I applaud anyone who's like trying to go that route, but to me, I'd rather just have sparkling water or regular water.
My favorite's been the beers at a Corona NA last night. Tasted just like Corona, which I was surprised. And then the wine, but I was outside of beer and wine, I don't think anything gets even close to giving that experience.
Yeah. But this does not taste terrible. I don't think it's trying to be something it's not.
No. How was your
solid?
cider?
It's basically sparkling apple juice, but I'm not mad.
Yeah, that's what
so
I
which one's better, that one or the milk and honey? The tall brown bottle?
Oh, I'm probably more a fan of this. I think by a little bit. Yeah, they're both pretty solid though.
It's so funny you mentioned vegan. So part of fallacy, I gotta tell her about it.
Oh sure, I thought you were gonna try to sell me on the vegan
I'm
play
not at
again.
all.
Okay.
So part of the fallacy thing, we're trying to make it a little more exciting for the audience. So every month, Emma and I are taking on a massive trend that's going around.
Okay.
And so right now we started the carnivore diet.
What is that?
You only literally eat meat and eggs.
Only meat.
Only meat and eggs.
For how long are you going to do
30
that?
30 days. I don't know what's going to happen. Joe Rogan made it a really big fad.
Well, I think here's your sign then.
And Jordan Peterson.
Not that he's not entertaining. He's very entertaining, but also like, what?
So he did it. Jordan Peterson did it.
There's some science.
There's a lot of science behind it to do it for like reset. So, like, give you an idea, I got on board with it because I'm having a huge issue with SIBO. I have no idea if you know what that is.
No.
Basically, it's small intestine bacteria that, like, breaks down everything.
Okay.
Floods the large intestine. And now you only have one type of bacteria in your whole entire. And so I've been trying to get rid of it for over a year now.
Yeah.
And it came about because I had colitis as a little kid.
Okay.
Which means you don't absorb any nutrients, and it took 2 years to solve it. So like my colon's already messed up, so it's super weak and doesn't control anything properly when it comes to like back and forth flow. And so what it lives off of is carbs and sugars. So if I don't eat any fruit, if I don't eat any carbs, like I feel way better. And they say hypothetically if you do this, it can reset that.
Huh.
So I hit him up and I was like, they also talk about inflammation goes through the floor. Your body recalibrates for proper water retention and sodium retention. So what we're doing is we're going to do this for 30 days and then we're going to do keto. So slowly bring veggies back in to like start resetting our system with fruits with that. And then the next 30 will be like only whole foods. We'll do carbs again, but whole foods and see how our body actually responds to it.
Well, I'm curious to see how that happens.
I'm full disclosure about 85% of the way on the carnivore diet all the time. So for me, it's just like, oh, no rice. But
yeah,
you weren't a veggie or a fruit guy. I was.
Yeah, nope.
Give me a good
I think
salad.
everybody's a little different, and you have to figure that out. Like I've gone the keto route. I don't actually respond that well to it. I find that when I have a lot more plant-based and then lean protein, but like healthy carbs mixed in there, I just do better.
Right. I like it. Well, perfect.
It's customized anyway.
Well, I appreciate you getting on.
Yeah.
Appreciate
This
being
is awesome.
vulnerable.
Thank you for
We're
having me.
definitely
Thank you
gonna steal you and your husband. For another
Okay.
one.
Yeah.
Took quite a fall, didn't we, Master Bruce?
And why do we fall, Bruce? So we can learn to pick ourselves up.